meeting of the Planning, Housing and Environment Services Committee. Just before we go into Sederunt and Apologies, just for the avoidance of any doubt, this committee will be getting audio recorded as we go forward. Item number 1, Sederunt and Apologies. I'll pass it over to you, Carol.
Thank you, Chairman. I will confirm that the meeting is quorate. I have to advise that a number of apologies have been received. I have apologies from Councillor Collins and Councillor Tuckfield. I would also advise that a number of members, Councillor Dempster, Councillor Lever, Councillor Martin, Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Smith, have advised that they may well be entering your meeting late, as there is a funeral today of one of your ex-colleagues. Okay.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Carol. We have the Sederunt Apologies. Declaration of interest. Anyone have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, thanks very much for that. We'll move on to item number 3, which is a zero waste policy and regulatory obligations. Report by Director of Plan and Environment Services. Do you have anything to add to the report, Director?
Chair, I have nothing to add to the report at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. We'll move to the floor regarding item 3, zero waste policy and regulatory obligations. Any floor got any questions? The point I'll pick up on first then is, I think, just as far as the recommendations are concerned, I think we should reverse these roundabout. I think we should be firstly getting a clear understanding why this whole committee paper is in front of us today, and I think we should be moving. I would move that we move recommendation 2.2, note the changes in legislation and the new mandatory duties for our council associated with the Scottish Government's transposition of the revised Waste Framework Directive 2008 through the Waste Scotland Regulations 2012 to number 1. And just, Councillor Geddes?
I have no problems with what you just said, sir, but I think the point I would draw to you, forgive me, it's not meant to be patronising, the point I would focus on rather than draw it to anyone's attention is the use of the word mandatory. We have no discretion in this. These are mandatory. And I think it's absolutely essential that that's appreciated here in this chamber today and in the wider community in Dumfries and Galloway.
Councillor Hislop, then Nigel.
Chair, just to agree with you as well. I think the fact of the matter is that we have seen a change in the legislation. That should be the first one to note, that that's why it's here, and then we're agreeing how we're going to take that forward in line with paragraph 4.28, so I'd be happy to support that as well.
Thanks for that. Councillor Diggle.
As a new member, I find it odd that we're adopting a new system of waste collection, having adopted the Eco-Deco sort of 3 or 4 years ago. I understand the reasoning behind it, but I find it odd, and I think the public will be finding it odd, that we're spending nearly 25 million on a new system. What I'd just like to ask the Director is what is the worst thing that can happen to us if we don't adopt these proposals?
Well, if we don't adopt these proposals, I think we'll be very unpopular with the Scottish Government, and we may in some way be penalised through funding for our waste management service. But I can't say that for definite. I think we should enter into the spirit of the legislation and go forward as laid out. That's what we would recommend as officers.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, with the respect to Mr Speedy, sir, it's no question of being popular or unpopular with the Scottish Government of the day, of whatever political complexion or persuasion that may or may not be. The blunt fact of the matter, sir, is, as I've already indicated, we have a mandatory duty to comply with these. Now, I know exactly where Peter's coming from, I think anyway, Peter, and at the end of the day, I mean, my attitude is that, the fact that we're having to go down this road, as far as I'm concerned, is not only profoundly disappointing, it's profoundly frustrating, and I'll make no other comment than that at this stage. We don't, Chair, have a choice in this. And irrespective of, the blunt fact of the matter, sir, is if we don't comply with the law, we'll leave ourselves open to legal sanctions. And that's what all this is about. And as I say, it's to my intense chagrin, believe you me. I'll leave it at that, sir.
No, I concur exactly with your sentiments there. Just as far as, just so we're absolutely clear before we do move on, because it looks like this could move on pretty quickly. Just have we took any advice, legal advice in any way, shape or form? Just so we're absolutely like to get right to the bottom of this and make sure that we're heading in the right direction legally, because we do feel certainly a degree of members within the council feel we could be getting pushed in this direction. Certainly, we can see the benefits, but there's a large investment here. There's over close to £24.5 million worth of investment from the council over the next 4 or 5 years. So, just if we can go back a couple of steps and just a quick summary of where we've come from and how we've got to where we are now, especially in regards to legal advice.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to legal advice, we've been well advised by our own legal team that supports the Waste PFI project, and they support everything that's before you today. We have taken other legal advice to support that, and that came through in a very similar vein. These are mandatory requirements, and the council has to follow them.
Councillor Geddes?
Chairman, when we talk about other, I mean, don't let's be euphemistic about this. You know, the people of Dumfries and Galloway are entitled to know. We prepared a memorial for senior council, and we have a QC's opinion, I'm correct in saying, an eminent QC's opinion, which makes it abundantly clear, in fact, that, you know, we are obliged basically to go down this route. We've exercised due diligence, in my opinion. We've been told clearly and unequivocally, you know, the implications for us if we don't. And therefore, as I say, despite my chagrin, we really, or anyone else's for that, or frustration or whatever, we really don't have a choice in this.
Yes, Chair, I would confirm exactly what Councillor Geddes has explained.
Thanks for that. Councillor Carson, then Diggle.
Yeah, I think we need to make it very clear in the recommendations that we are not happy that we've been pushed down this road. That doesn't mean to say that the proposals that are on the table in front of us won't give us a perfectly satisfactory and waste, excuse me, zero waste policy going forward. And, you know, I don't think there's any argument that if what the officers have come up with is it's something that we need to grasp and make the best of, because I think the report's very good. But I think the public need to be in no doubt that we've been forced down this route. And given the choice, we would be staying with the status quo, because we've got a system that works well. It was very advanced, state of the art. And I think it's really important that the public realise that this is not a decision that it's really, as councillors, we can do anything other than accept.
I'm just trying to think what wording we could actually use, and as far as, have you got any ideas, as far as if you look to put in another recommendation? Have you got any ideas that we could come up with if you want to be as explicit as that? Councillor Geddes?
I think, sir, that 4.2, if you want to amend it somewhat to say, note the changes in the legislation, and well, I mean, to me, quite frankly, it says it as it is there, and I really think it's superfluous, as it were, to try to submit, with all due respect to Finlay, a further recommendation. I think we adopt 2.2 first, and then we move, sir, to consideration of 2.1. And I would move that we do that.
Okay, thanks. I'll agree with that, and I've asked Carla, can we pick it up and be quite explicit within the minute that we feel as if we're being pushed in this direction because of Scottish Government legislation. Are you okay with that, Carla? Can you pick that up?
Forgive me for nitpicking, sir. It's not Scottish Government legislation. It's Scottish Government interpretation, as I understand it, of a European directive, to be precise. That's no particular comfort, but never mind.
Thank you. Obviously, what the first instance is that members are noting the changes in the legislation and the new mandatory duties for our council associated with the Scottish Government's transposition of the revised Waste Framework Directive through the Waste Scotland regulations. I think you need to preference that, because I've just had a quick check against with the report, that legal advice has been sought and that there remains no discretion for the council other than to, okay? And And obviously, I haven't actually got the evidence in front of me that legal advice has to be sought, so I have to have the confirmation from the director. Thank you.
Okay, so we're okay then to move the recommendations, reverse roll them, agree them as is, and we'll be absolutely clear within the minute that there's a degree of resistance, to say the least, against this. Okay, thanks so much for that. We'll move on to item number 4, which is zero waste awareness and prevention. Director, do you have anything to add to this report?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add at this stage. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Primarily regarding, as it clearly states, it's raising awareness and prevention and the funding implications, and also to the response to the Scottish Government Safeguarding Scotland's Resources Appendix 1. Any members got any questions? I suppose the only question I've got is regarding to a response to the Scottish Government's consultation. It seems to be aimed primarily at business rather than the council, but we've picked up on quite a few things. So if we've got any points we'd like to pick up on that, it's almost like we're answering on behalf of business, so I'd just like to, is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of waste prevention, there's little the council can do. We do our home compost and our real nappies, and we guide the public on how to reduce their waste, but in terms of the wider picture, it's got to come from the retailers and the manufacturers and businesses making materials more suitable for recycling and reducing the components to them.
Thanks for that, Greg. Thanks very much. Councillor Peacock, then, Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. Just in the appendix there on point B, and it's just a comment. I know because these are the responses to the government's questions there, but it's referring into the construction sector there with the zero waste pledge. Although, I mean, I agree with the principle, but you know, I have to stress that the cost implications that are put onto that particular sector with the zero waste policy there, it's going to make it particularly difficult for that sector to comply with these regulations there, and probably make it unpractical to a lot of the smaller and medium-sized firms that are in this sector. Although, as I say, I agree with the overall principle. The actual enforcing of such a, because I know it's sort of voluntary, but we're trying to get round to that particular issue of the zero waste, and it will be very, very difficult for the small and medium enterprises to comply with that.
Do you have any comment, Greg, with regard to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think where we're heading in terms of the Scottish Government's delivery body, Zero Waste Scotland, they, instead of doing site waste management plans, which the bigger organisations can undertake and have got resources to do that, it'll be a very simple one-page sheet that they could fill in and identify opportunities. But I mean, none of it's mandatory, and there is some cost savings that can be delivered.
Councillor Prentice, Geddes, then Hislop.
Thanks, Chair. Although, you know, what I want to mention, I mean, I want to make it very plain that it doesn't affect me personally, and it's the Nappy project. I'm long past that, but it does concern me. Greg was saying yesterday that we could have nappies left in bins for up to 2 weeks. It doesn't appear to me that this is a particularly healthy way forward for waste products from the human body.
I did pick up within the report myself. I'll let you answer it and then come back. But I did pick up myself that we're trying to get away into, is it more natural use, traditional nappies rather than disposable?
Yeah. I mean, what this report outlines is a cash incentive for householders, £30 for householders, to use reusable nappies. So that avoids those nappies being disposed of. They can be washed and reused. There is a number of projects going on all over Scotland. 3 or 4 councils are currently collecting real nappy products for recycling. But these are trials, and there's no conclusions from those studies yet.
Can I just come back with a comment? Does this mean we're actually going back to the old-fashioned way of toweling nappies?
That's what I think it's been in place already, and we'll just re-emphasise on that. 3.6, George, I think it is the Real Nappy project, which is, yep, that's what we're promoting, which is, I did try that when my kids were younger, and rashy bums, excuse the the phrase was throws me back to disposables. Anyways, Councillor Geddes, you're next.
Thanks, Chairman. Can I suggest, I think, that, agree entirely with the points that George and Craig have made, but, Craig's comment in particular, I think maybe we should be sort of trying to toughen up the response, to take cognizance and to reflect, his concerns. And if we're able to do that, sir, in suitable words, I would have no compunction in the circumstances in moving that we adopt the recommendations.
Happy to do that. We'll come back to that. Just Councillor Hislop after Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it was on the food waste. Are we able at any stage to actually lobby the likes of the major supermarkets? Because a lot of the food waste that comes about is 2 for 1, etc. And you buy 2 things, one sits on the shelf and goes out of date, another one you have used. It's usually in short-dated things that you get these offers. And is there something we could do where you could actually get it for half price? Maybe we should be lobbying, because that would allow them actually to possibly sell it. It would also be beneficial for people who couldn't actually afford the full cost of the 2, but they could maybe benefit from one at half price.
Zero Waste Scotland are currently working with a number of supermarkets, and they've signed up to what's called the Courtauld Commitment, both to reduce packaging and make more information available to householders around sell-by dates, etc. I don't think there's any harm in us taking something forward as a council, but there is work going on with other authorities, but I think we should do something as well.
Well, just the last wee point is in 3.12, Greg. It says it's the Dumfries and Galloway Zero Waste Volunteers Programme. I would imagine volunteers will be entitled to likes of subsistence and expenses, travel mileage and such like. Just clarity on that, please.
Yeah, that's correct. They are. All expenses are paid.
Okay, thanks. Just, obviously, that would be restrictive, I thought, if it wasn't the case. So, have all points been covered? Yep, okay. We're happy with the recommendations as is? Councillor Carson?
Just, thanks, Chairman. Just a very, very quick one. Page 37, where it breaks down the various different materials for collection. Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, Chair.
We'll just come back to, if we agree to the recommendation, but subject to, I think Councillor Geddes and Councillor Peacock raised a particular point in regards to a slight change to the consultation response. Do we want to pick up on that point?
I would move that we do, sir. Toughen it up along the lines that Councillor Peacock has suggested.
Can you do that personally, Greg? Is that something to do? Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Yep. Carol, just wondering, can you confirm for the record just exactly what that is? Could you be explicit with that, please?
Yes, Chair, I'll try my best. It was just for the small to medium-sized companies in the construction sector, which paragraph B refers to at the moment. Well, it refers to all sections of construction, but I was more on the small to medium-sized enterprises within that sector. Just saying that we agree with the principle of the zero waste pledge that the government has there, but stressing that the cost implications, and especially within these economic times, could make it impractical for a lot of these companies to comply with that. And it is, the resources available to them would make it difficult for the small to medium-sized enterprises to comply with that pledge.
Have you encapsulated that? No? Thanks very much for that. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, which is zero waste necessary changes to the waste collection service. Director, do you have anything to add to this report?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add at this stage. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. I'll open up to the members for questions. Any questions regarding item number 5? Councillor Hislop?
Chair, it's in relation to recommendation 2.4. I'm just wondering if it's a typo under, as detailed in paragraph 345, because when I read 345, there is no reference in there to the actual officers in question, but there was under 356. I was just wondering if that was a typo.
Thank you, Chair. yes, Leader, I think we've wrongly referenced that, so thank you for your drawing that to our attention. We'll sort that. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I didn't pick up on that either. Councillor Geddes?
I would suggest, sir, I think, well, I'm sure we've all been through the report in detail individually and in our groups and groupings, and in the circumstances, I would move the adoption of the recommendations as set out in box 2 of the report.
Happy to accept. Don't I think looking at me, I've got different notes on different points, but 2.5, to note the potential budget pressure for £422,000 from 2015-16 on. I think we need to be absolutely clear where we are with that. As it stands, we're being subsidised to that tune through the Zero Waste Scotland Fund. That will be a pressure, and I think we can't emphasise, we can't hammer this point hard enough as far as the budget pressure and the look for further support for the Scottish Government in future years when it comes to this point. I think we need to be absolutely clear on that. Other than that recommendation, I'll go through 2.1. Everybody okay with that? Option 2. There's two options with choice here. Option 2 or 4. I'm happy to go with option 2. Absolutely fine with that. Yep. Option 2.2, which is to agree to vary the PFI contract, do the recycling points. 2.3 is to bid for the I've added up to 1.643 million. Is that correct? As tables 3, 4, and 5. Appendix 2. To accept, 2.4 is to accept the offer of financial support from Zero Waste Scotland to appoint a project manager, so on and so forth. And 2.5, just make sure that we hammer this point. This could be a potential a real budget pressure for us in the future. And I suppose under 2.5, I think it is of the next paper, we can bring this point up again and further reports that come back to us to committee. Okay, we're okay with that then? Councillor Carson?
Thanks, Chair. It's the recommendations. It's not to do with. I was just interested on back to. I'm not jumping the gun now. Hopefully, page 37. One of the difficulties I think we're going to have is people understanding and getting their mindset into recycling again. I was interested to note the plastic bottles, plastic beverages. About every single plastic apart from plastic packaging or other plastic containers. Now, I would have thought a lot of plastic waste is plastic packaging, but it doesn't actually specify what group or. Why is that separate? I know it's a technical issue, but it may be something that I get asked.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what's being proposed, it will only be plastic bottles, so no other types of packaging. And that's really guidance from other local authorities that have said that it's very difficult to determine what type of plastic each material is, and therefore it's simply plastic bottles. And that's where the high value material is, and that's where you get your closed loop recycling back to bottles rather than other materials.
Thanks for that. Just when we're looking at the different containers and just behind you there, Greg, it's not explicit. I don't see it being explicit here that we've got a single big wheelie bin as we do at the moment. That is still part of the mix, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that's collected alternate week to the dry recyclers.
Councillor Diggle then.
Again, not again to do with the recommendations, but how do you see it being policed that people are going to put the right thing in the right container?
In terms of the big bad police, that's not what we see going forward. It will be very much encouragement, education and guidance provided. But the great thing about the scheme we're proposing is that the collection operatives will be able to check the materials at the curbside prior to putting that onto the various vehicles. And if any mistakes been made, then that, whatever that may be, can be returned back to the householder.
Councillor Geddes and Hislop.
Well, I think, Chairman, that it's absolutely essential and imperative that we have as wide-ranging and as effective an educative process as possible. And to that extent, I would hope, in fact, that the equipment there at the back of the chamber is taken out, for instance, to the likes of community councils, community groups, and maybe even a roadshow, because it's imperative that we explain this to the people that we're charged with serving and representing. And as part of that process, maybe we can reiterate, as to why, we're having to go down this route. But I'm not going to rehearse and reopen any further comments and discussions we had in the earlier part of the agenda. So I would hope, and I would suggest perhaps that we maybe get a proposed educative programme brought before this committee for approval, spelling out just exactly what we propose to do, the groups we're proposing to target, etc., and how best we can do that, with a view to ensuring, in fact, that, as I've said, these people that we're charged with serving and representing our electorate and our constituents are as aware as possible of the implications, and we can be as helpful as possible in assisting them in complying with that.
How explicit do you want to be with that? Do you want it in the recommendations, or do you want it to pick up in the minute, and as far as having a report coming back? And I mean, we've picked up on it earlier how we will make people aware and such like, so just, I'll take it from yourself.
I would like, if at all possible, sir, to put it into the recommendations, as a consequence of which it becomes part of the official record of this meeting.
We'll do that. We'll have a 2.6. And Councillor Hislop, Leader.
Chair, it's with relation to the types of containers and their capacities. If you have a 44-litre box full of paper, now will that weigh heavier than, is it 20 kilos that you're allowed to lift, and is there any health and safety implications with regard to that for the public having to carry them out to the side of the road?
In terms of the container selection, the paper and cards are 44 litre, and that's been recommended by the supplier in terms of weight restrictions to comply with health and safety legislation.
As it stands, you have to bring in a second. As it stands, we have a pull-out service as well, don't we? So I take it that'll still apply. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that service will apply.
Thanks for that, Greg. Councillor Carson.
Can I be really childish here, possibly? I can read the paper and what's what. Could one of the officers maybe just stand up and give us a quick overview of what the bins will be used for? Because it might sink into my head a wee bit quicker. If you could maybe spare a minute to do that, I would appreciate it.
If somebody prepares those, so I'll just ask Councillor Prentice, do you want to ask a question? Then Stephen will go over what bins for what.
It's not really a question, Chair. It's just an observation that I think one of the biggest problems that members will have is trying to explain why we stopped the paper collection 2 or 3 years ago and lifted the blue bins and took them back home and all the rest of it. And here we are, we're turning around about and handing out black bins for the paper. And the oft-asked question, I can envisage it, is why? What the hell are you doing? You stopped it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and now you're restarting again.
I mean, it's quite clear in my mind at the time we made it, that was a budget decision that was made. This information certainly wasn't legislation. Had it been interpreted at that time, Councillor Prentice, I'm not trying to...
Chair, you convince the general public of that.
See, to each individual councillor take it up. Councillor Peacock, sorry, I missed you out there, and then Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a note with the figures on page 33 there of the appendix here, with the preferred option and option 2. It's quite interesting to note that out of all the options put before us there, it is actually the poorest performing regarding recycling and the carbon metric performance. You know, and especially with it being a so separate collection as well compared to the co-mingled collections and that the figures show before us too. And you know, whilst it's the preferred option, it is still the least performance on the recycling and the carbon management. Can it have some sort of comeback on that?
I kind of half anticipated that question earlier. That's when I went the recommendations. But Greg, why option 2? Would that be why option 2 and not any other options?
It was put forward as option 2 because of the 5 options there, that was deemed to be only one of 2 that would actually comply with the legislation due to the capture rates for food waste. And in terms of between option 2 and 4, I think in terms of the overall cost, option 2 is significantly lower in cost, and the performance levels of 1 or 2% lower. I didn't see justified the extra cost for that option.
Okay, thanks for that. We're through them. Anyways, Stephen, could I ask you just to give us a quick demo? Is that okay?
The brown box there is what's termed a kitchen caddy. Generally that's used in the kitchen for food waste. As part of the service, liners would be provided so householders could put their food into the liner then into the box. And then you remove the liner with the food into the larger container, which would be presented at curbside. We then have two boxes, one 44 litres for paper and cardboard, and the other 55 litres for glass bottles, plastic bottles, and cans, mixed cans. Both presented at the curbside, and then the driver and the collection operatives would take those materials and put them onto separate compartments on the vehicle.
Thanks very much for that, Stephen. Greg. Greg, then Dennis.
Chair, thanks. Just regarding the paper bin there, it looks as if it doesn't have a lid on it. I mean, with the papers and that would be put in there, if as the weather that we have, they would get very wet. Would that affect the recyclability?
Yeah, the smaller box will come with a lid. We just don't have a lid with us today.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Item number 6, zero waste infrastructure and thermal. Oh, sorry, Dennis, you're next.
It would seem common sense to me if these had been made to fit into the existing wheelie bin, then it could still have been wheeled out. I'm thinking especially for the elderly. They could then have taken it to the curbside as one bin and it could have just been lifted out and used in its separate unit. Because I see problems here, especially for the elderly, especially in some of the rural areas, at the distance some of these things have got to travel. I mean, even if it's just a couple of 100 metres from a house, it's still a long, long way for an elderly person to carry three separate things in different times. But if it had all fitted in one wheelie bin and been all on the same day, then it would have been easy.
Yep, it's certainly an idea. That's why I've had it in the past many times, and that's why I asked about the pull-out service. That service is there, so if there's anybody elderly or vulnerable, that option's open for them. Somebody will come up, lift their bin from their house, take it down, recycle it at that point, and then take it back. So that service is certainly there.
Surely that's going to double, treble, and quadruple the time it takes for the service. And
I mean, it's someone unless you. I mean, it's maybe some point to raise, but it's DG First that will actually manage that for us, that process. Certainly, we have as a commissioner, we have a role to play and put comment on that. But I mean, I think Greg gave us reassurance earlier, just to be sure, and that this is different policies, this is different methods that have been used by other councils.
So what is going to happen to the wheelie bins?
We still retain, that's already been explained, we still retain the wheelie bin. We still retain it, yep, as well as these. Right, and okay. Item number 6, but Councillor Nicholson, I think you were wanting, and I seen you.
No, it was just, I take it the recommendations have been accepted.
Could you just confirm that, Carol? They have been accepted.
They've been accepted. It's no worth us. I mean, it's no worth us asking any questions. It's just a shame that we were excluded us from this meeting and showed no respect to an ex-councillor's family.
You certainly excluded yourself. We certainly never excluded you, and that's as much as I'll say in that. Item number 6, but is it on item number 6, Colin?
Well, it's on item number 5. It's kind of strange if we had a debate on item number 5 after the recommendations, but anyway, it's on number 5. It's actually on that box there. Obviously, a number of people at the moment, when we had the blue boxes, which obviously Jury voted to abolish, I've actually still got my blue box, but one of the issues I had at the time is that actually it wasn't big enough for the amount of paper that some people actually had. Now, what I used to do is obviously take that to a recycling point when I had excess paper over and above what was in the blue box. Where obviously you've agreed to get rid of the recycling points, I assume, if you went with the recommendations. So what happens basically, what's the advice we're going to give to people when actually their green box, which is pretty small looking, is full of papers? What do they do with the excess papers if they can't take them to a recycling point?
Yeah, I mean, as part of the recommendations, you'll be provided with a second 44-litre box, and that can be used either for paper and card or the other materials.
Okay, thanks for that. Item number 6, which is zero waste infrastructure and thermal contracts. Director, do you have anything to add to this report?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll open it up to the floor then. Any questions from the floor? Councillor Geddes, there you go.
Thanks, Chairman. Forgive the parochialness of the question, but there are frequent references made in there to household waste recycling centres, and it was just my understanding, is in fact that we've proposed such a facility long overdue. Some of us would argue for the Newton Stewart area. Indeed, we've got planning consent for a specific site, Chairman. It's not mentioned as being provided under this particular report. I think I'm correct in saying, Mr. Speedy, that will be addressed, as it were, under the capital expenditure programme for the January 2013 meeting of this committee. Is that correct, sir?
Chair, if I can just confirm at the committee in January 2013, members will consider the capital programme set out in its various infrastructure asset classes, and this will certainly be included in the infrastructure asset class.
I'll keep my powder dry until then, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillor Diggle.
I was just going to say that I'm very pleased to see that Moffat Can have been included in part of the strategy here. No doubt the detail to be worked out later. Moffat Can, as well as recycling a lot of stuff, they also employ a lot of staff with potential barriers to employment, which is a great community thing. Thank you.
Councillor Mail.
Yeah, being slightly parochial as well, Chairman, over the last 5-6 years, the Langham Recycling Centre has been part of the deal along with Newton Stewart, so I presume that will come back in the same report in January.
The Langham Recycling Centre was the second priority, Newton Stewart being the first, so it may not come back in that report depending on the other demands against the money available.
Just Chair, the carbon footprint for Langham is 50-mile round trip for anybody that wants to use the recycling centre, and we've been promised it in 2014, 2015, I thought, and if it slips, then that really is bad news because, as I say, it is a 50-mile round trip every time somebody wants to use one.
Thanks so much for that. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thanks, Chair. Being parochial, but I'm sure it's the same for all these coastal quarry, or coastal, sorry, recycling centre. It's took us years to get people to go there regularly. Flag tipping, flag tipping seems to have diminished in and around Dannon area. Fine, we're going to this new system, but people who take big items like mattresses and sofas and fridges and electrical goods, I take it that'll still be available, Annan?
Chair, yes, absolutely. Our household recycling centres will remain and they'll remain manned. Yep.
Yep, the impact will be on the recycling centres. Councillor Lever.
The solid recovered fuel, I see there's still going to be 10,000 tonnes of that. Where will that be going? Is it still going to be shipped down to Rugby in Wales for the cement kilns? From a carbon footprint point of view, I think I prefer a more local source. I noticed that we have been in negotiation with ScotGen with the pyrolysis plant. That seems to have gone by the by. So what's the current situation with that?
The 10,000 tonnes isn't actually solid recovered fuel from Ecodeco. That'll be materials that we wouldn't necessarily process through Ecodeco. We can't recycle, and residues from the new processing plants. We are in discussions with a number of parties, and that will obviously depend on procurement standing orders, etc., etc.
But will the issue of the carbon footprint be taken into account? I mean, it's not just the best price you can get, whatever. It's the overall impact on the environment.
Yeah, in terms of that process, all aspects will have to be taken into consideration, whether that's transport and the type of process that's being proposed.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding composting facilities on page 42, 4.2.5. It tells us that because of the food treatment waste and the anaerobic digestion, there's no suitable facilities within our region, and the PFI model, we cannot capital fund a new resource of that type. Therefore, we will have to transport the food wastes out of the region again to a suitable treatment plant, and it states that there that there's transport costs, and there will be treatment costs to that food waste as well. Now, considering the fact that through the figures that we're presented with, there's thousands and thousands of tons of food waste here. Are the costs, the figures aren't put down here, but it tells us that there will be costs involved with that. So are these costs already built into the revenue budget there as part of that possible budget pressure, the 422,000, or will these be additional costs that will come back to the council and therefore put more budget pressure on it?
Yeah, they've been built into the cost. I mean, the proposal involves around half the material being composted with our green waste from the recycling centres, and out with the growing season when we have no garden waste, we'll have to transport out with the region. But that's only the current position. If a company or a supplier wishes to develop an anaerobic digestion plant, then that would obviously be something that we could potentially use as a council.
I've no other names marked down. Make sure I haven't missed any. No, we'll go to the recommendations. Recommendation 2.1. The whole raft of different projects within 2.1. They amount to the 24.441 million that's we look to invest. Just before we got that recommendation, with the council has 52 priorities. Within that, it's obviously keeping as much as the council's priorities, keep as much of that financial benefit, you could say, to the local economy and through the procurement process. So how will we tie this in as best the ways we can? There's large sums, so we'll have to go to ODU and such like, I would imagine, but large sums of figures here, we definitely will go with the figures that are in front of us. So how do we retain as much of that within the local economy as possible?
In terms of the recommendations, they've really been split up in terms of technology, which can be provided locally, and then the other areas, the civil works, which can be undertaken locally. What we would do with DG First in terms of design services, we'd hold a number of workshops in local areas to allow local contractors to develop their PQQs and stuff and things like that, so they can be involved in the process and have the skills, at least to submit the relevant tenders.
No, thanks very much for that. Councillor Geddes?
It's merely to move the recommendations on blocks as set out in section 2 of the report.
Sorry, I missed that because of background noise. Say that again, please.
Merely to move the recommendations, the adoption of the recommendations en bloc as set out in section 2 of the report.
Is anyone otherwise minded? No? Okay. Okay. Well, thanks very much. That's us. No further business. Thank you.